Good morning and peace be upon you wherever you're tuning in from. You're listening to the Qasim Rashid Show here on Sirius XM Urban View Channel 126, the most awesome show in the multiverse. I've been excited about this for a while. If you guys know me and have been seeing the work I've been doing, I've been at the Broadview facility, I've been out on the streets in Naperville, I've been doing whatever I can to make sure we're exercising our First Amendment right while we still can, especially as the fascists in the White House continues to deploy the National Guard, continues to deploy ICE agents. It's important and critical that we are out. And again, folks are telling me they're scared, and I get that. And this is where I tell citizens, use your privilege as a citizen. We need messengers, not martyrs. We don't need immigrants or undocumented immigrants to get in a baton over the head or to get arrested and captured by ICE. We need people that have due process of law. And that happens when we step up. You may not have seen it yet, but ProPublica just came out with this devastating report documenting at minimum 170 U.S. citizens who have been arrested, tased, beaten, tortured by these ICE fascists, including 3 women who were pregnant. One pregnant woman was thrown down on her belly, and of course, the horrific injuries resulting from that. And what I want to emphasize is that these 170 U.S. citizens, the vast majority, nearly every single one, is a Latino American. Every single one. And this further demonstrates that this has nothing to do with national security or due process of law. This has everything to do with white supremacy and fascism. That's what it fundamentally comes down to. I've said this before. There are more than 600,000 undocumented, predominantly white, European and Canadian immigrants in the United States. You're not seeing the Trump regime go after them the way you've seen them go after Latino immigrants, African immigrants, Asian immigrants. This is grounded in white supremacy. I'm going to talk about the alleged ceasefire deal. I still call it alleged because I don't trust Trump or Netanyahu, and talk about what that means. And I'm going to ask a very, very important question, specifically to those who have stayed silent this entire time. The question is, was it worth it? Was it worth it to know that this is how history is going to remember you? Stay with us. You're listening to the Qasim Rashid Show here on Sirius XM Urban View Channel 126. If you're listening on Substack, make sure you hit that subscribe button. If you're watching on YouTube, make sure you hit that subscribe button. I'm trying to grow my YouTube platform, and that only happens with your support. Welcome back. You're listening to the Qasim Rashid Show here on Sirius XM Urban View Channel 126, the most awesome show in the multiverse. If you're watching on YouTube or on Substack, make sure you hit that subscribe button. I know I promised I would be bringing you live footage from the No Kings protest in Chicago. We had some technical difficulties. I wasn't able to get that footage as quickly as I'd wanted, so it will go live on my Substack and YouTube on Monday. But if you're listening to this on Sunday, I promise the rest of the show will still be extraordinarily important, because I'm going to be talking about something adjacent to why we're having these protests, and that is the fact that these ICE fascists are breaking every rule book. They are violating the 5th Amendment due process clause, violating the 14th Amendment due process clause, violating 4th Amendment right against search and seizure of private property without a warrant, basically enabling the fascism that we're trying to protest in the first place. And so I wanted to spend a little bit of time today on how to protect yourself and your immigrant neighbors from ICE raids. I want to answer a couple of the most common FAQs that I get on countering ICE raids. I want to provide 7 meaningful ways of what you can be doing to better protect your immigrant and undocumented neighbors. And I want to talk about something extremely sinister called the 287G program. And some of you know what I'm talking about, many of you don't. And that's a problem, because the 287G program is one of the most effective ways that the Trump regime is utilizing to round up people. And it's also one of the most meaningful things that we can repeal, and it doesn't require an act of Congress, it doesn't require a governor's executive order, it doesn't require the federal government at all. In fact, it requires coordination on a local level with your local city council members. That's it. And your local mayor. That's literally it. And unfortunately, people don't know this. And so because people don't know this, and because the Trump regime has unlimited money for militarizing and turning us into a police state, this program is expanding rapidly. And it's up to us to not only recognize what's exactly happening, but then also enact policies to prevent this from continuing to perpetuate. And so I want to talk about that today, and I want to be able to give you guys insight on exactly what steps you should be taking. But let me start with something a bit more basic. Over the past few months, as ICE fascists have escalated their abusive tactics in Chicago, I've joined thousands, it's not tens of thousands of my fellow Chicagoans to protest them loudly in the streets, a right our First Amendment guarantees. Meanwhile, the Trump regime is doing everything possible to target immigrants, to create fear, to fabricate excuses, to deploy the military on immigrants and on US-born citizens. Now, as an immigrant myself, as someone who is fortunate to work as a human rights lawyer, this anti-immigrant hate strikes to my core. It strikes to everything I've worked against my entire career. And that's why I'm speaking out without hesitation. What I want to talk about today is the specific guidance that I need each of you to internalize on how to protect your rights when these ICE raids come. And unfortunately, at this point, it's looking inevitable. They've got a $50 billion budget and a mandate from a fascist to make life living hell for anyone who's non-white. That's basically it. And I'm going to provide some data to back that up because I'm not just being hyperbolic. It's actually pretty well documented. One data point I'll share, ProPublica just released a report that 170 US citizens have been arrested, beaten, and tortured by ICE. 170. And that's just what we know of. That's just documented. These are US citizens. And almost all of them are of Latino ethnicity. And so we know that this is a racially targeted fascist regime. This is what they're going after. And when ICE comes and tries to strip your rights away, I need you to take clear actions on protecting yourself, protecting your immigrant neighbors. And again, I can't do this alone. You can't do this alone. If you're listening and you value this, hit that subscribe button so we can continue to create this content and keep you aware of how to protect your rights against this fascism. So, just a week ago, I was in Broadview with Don Lemon, and Don Lemon asked me an important question. He asked, "What message do I have for the public?" And I wanted to point out something very specific, and I did to him. That, I was there that morning, and police in Broadview had forced me to move under threat of arrest. We were already behind a barricade, hundreds of meters away from the ICE facility, which was boarded up. They had an illegal fence up there as well. They had already moved us to a pretty far distance. And now, despite that, they threatened to arrest us. We didn't even move further away. And I thought about it, but I thought, you know what? This is not the time to die on this hill because I want to be able to get this message out there. And nobody got arrested that day. The one person they detained for a few minutes said they let him go. But the point is that and this is the point I made to Don Lemon, that every single act of violence that we're seeing right now is one way. It's from ICE fascists attacking ordinary working people, ordinary citizens, ordinary immigrants, ordinary people just trying to live their life as best as they can, peacefully, compliant, with a sense of decency. And every act of violence we're seeing is one way. And that's what this Trump regime is trying to do. They're trying to instigate. They're trying to get a reaction. That's why they're firing rubber bullets, smoke bombs, pepper balls, hitting people. This is why they're trying to intimidate, because they hope that they can intimidate us into silence. And so I want to start with some of the 4 most common questions that I'm receiving from folks on how to protect themselves during these ICE raids. If you haven't already read it, ICE is short for Immigration and Customs Enforcement. This is not some ancient organization that has been here since the founding of America that we've needed from a core founding. No, this is an organization built effectively in the late 90s, early 2000s to further militarize our enforcement agencies. Rather than investing in meaningful, comprehensive, justice-based immigration reform, something we've never had in this country ever, they're just trying to police our way out of the system, which is, again, a failing strategy as well. So the first question I get most commonly is, in light of ICE raids, should I be sending my child to school? Most of you know I'm a parent, I've got 3 amazing kids, and this is a very painful question. But it's a question that I'm receiving increasingly from parents and teachers alike. Because look, student and child safety is of paramount importance. Trump is sending his cronies into schools while lying about who they are, meaning they're refusing to show their ID. All to literally kidnap children and deport them. This is absolute fascism. So what do? Well, a couple things. One, call your local Board of Education and your teachers union. Do it now. Make sure you understand what steps they are taking to protect your children and how you can be involved. They need to have a game plan. This is why they're elected to these positions. They need to have a clear game plan of what to do if ICE fascists try to raid a school. Make sure you speak to them. Make sure you understand what that game plan is. Two, and we're going to talk more about this. I mentioned it earlier. Demand your city council break any agreements with ICE, including what's commonly known as a 287G agreement. And make sure that your local police focuses on local issues, not federal ICE issues. And the thing is that this is not just an action to be taken by immigrant parents. I ask especially those of us who are U.S. citizens who maybe don't have immigrants in our family, or maybe who don't have any undocumented children in our family. I need you to stand as an ally. Contact your local board of education, contact your teachers union, ask them how you can get involved. And then finally, for parents out there, call your local school principal and ask them what is their policy if ICE comes to their schools. And I've had these conversations with the administration of the schools my kids attend, public schools, and I was extraordinarily heartwarmed to hear them make explicitly clear that they have a lockdown situation to prevent children from being kidnapped. And the fact that I have to say that is a strange thing. Like, I'm heartwarmed that our children are safe, but I'm mortified that we need a lockdown for two types of people, mass shooters and ICE fascists. Like, that's insane. But that's the world that we live in. And so have that conversation. Make sure you understand exactly what they're going to be doing should, God forbid, something bad happen, and that you're able to act and react at that point in time. Second common question I get is, what do I do if I'm stopped by ICE? And this is an important question because different states have different policies. Some states you have to show ID, other states you don't. But here's the thing. First thing, remain calm. And I know that's the most difficult thing in the world at that time. But train yourself, force yourself to remain calm. Don't give them an excuse to say you were nervous or acting suspicious. Just remain calm. You know you're not breaking the law. You know that even if you are undocumented, it's a misdemeanor. It's not a criminal act. It's a civil violation like a parking ticket or a speeding ticket. Remain calm. And while the following that I'm giving you is not official legal advice, this is a mandatory disclaimer. As a lawyer, I have to say it, that I'm not giving you legal advice. But what I can say is that this is what I would do myself, and this is what I've advised my actual legal clients to do. Again, not legal advice to you, but just take all these hypotheticals of what I would do in my situation. One, have your A number memorized. Have your phone number of your lawyer memorized. And have the phone numbers of the family member that you need to call memorized. You should expect that if you are detained, that they will take anything and everything away from you. And that they will leave it to your memory to have to recall and regurgitate this information. Have that data point. Those three really important pieces of information: your A number, the phone number of your lawyer, and the phone number of your family. Have those numbers memorized. Don't count on having access to your phone or your bag or a notepad or anything else. Have them memorized. I recently had a client go for her citizenship hearing. I've been working with her for a while, and she literally took my phone number and wrote it on her hand in case she needed to call me, that if God forbid something happened. I reassured her nothing would, and thankfully nothing would. But just make sure you have these vital information data points available in your mind. Don't write it on your hand, just have them memorized and be able to go that way. Two, and I can't emphasize number two enough, do not speak to ICE agents. Do not speak to ICE agents without your lawyer present. If you are asked to speak, to give any testimony, to sign any document, exercise your right to remain silent. One of the most important things we can do is make sure that we are exercising our constitutional protections and rights, no matter what they tell you, and they will lie to you. That's going to be a point in a second. But just make sure that you are exercising your right to remain silent. You don't lose any benefits or rights by speaking early. In fact, you make things more difficult for yourself. And that's number three. The best way to not lie is just to not speak. But do not lie or give false statements or false documents. That is a big no-no. ICE agents, ICE fascists, are allowed to lie to you when they speak to you. They're allowed to try to trick you into confessing something. They're allowed to misrepresent the on-the-ground reality in hopes that you might snitch or snark or give up some information that they couldn't get otherwise. You are not allowed to lie to ICE fascists or to any law enforcement agency. You're not. First of all, you're not going to outsmart them because they have more information, they have more time, they have more money. But also, it's not going to do you any good to lie to them. It's going to come back and bite you in the butt
and it's just not worth it. So don't do it. Do not do it. Don't lie. The best thing to do is just to remain silent. And the best way to not lie is to remain silent. Next, if an ICE agent appears at your door, you do not have to allow them to enter your home unless they have a criminal search warrant signed by an actual judge. You are completely within your rights to turn them away, to refuse to open the door. If they don't offer that signed judicial warrant, you have no need to engage with them, and you can just tell them to go away. And this brings me to point 5. Know the difference between an ICE detainer and a judicial warrant. Only a judicial warrant allows for someone's arrest. An ICE detainer is a self-created document that ICE uses to give the perception of legitimacy. There is no legitimacy. An ICE detainer is as valid as a stained napkin, and it belongs in the garbage can just like said napkin. If an ICE fascist shows up with an ICE detainer, you are not under any legal obligation to go with them. In fact, that is the best time to tell them, go away, stop wasting my time. An ICE detainer is basically ICE saying, I give myself permission to arrest you. That's not how a warrant works. They have to go to a judge, submit evidence of probable cause, the judge reviews the evidence, and then allows them, issues a warrant to say, okay, you've convinced me, I will allow you to arrest this person. That's what due process of law requires. An ICE detainer is not due process of law. And you need to understand how critical it is that the only time that you should worry about ICE taking you away and having the right to do so is when they show up with a judicial warrant. Then you are legally required to go with them. Regardless, even if you are legally required to go with them, do not speak to ICE for any reason. Being legally required to go with them does not mean you are legally required to speak to them. In that situation, especially, once they've detained you with a judicial warrant, do not speak. Say, I want a lawyer, I want my lawyer, I'm invoking my Fifth Amendment right, I do not want to speak, I'm not giving you any information, get me a lawyer and I will speak through my attorney, period. So again, just to emphasize this point, the only words you should say to ICE agents are to ask if they have a judicial warrant for your arrest. If they have a judicial warrant, okay, you have to go with them. If they do not, send them on their way. And if they do, then request to speak with your lawyer and say no more to ICE. The only words you should speak to them is, I want my lawyer. Citizen or not, documented immigrant or undocumented immigrant, your documentation status does not restrict your constitutional rights. It does not restrict your right to speak to a lawyer. So exercise your rights. All right, that was a lot, but I want to make sure that part is clear. Number 3, next question I get is, should I call local police for help? Now, here's the thing. Calling local police to stop ICE officers is not necessarily a great idea. Certain jurisdictions have what's known as a 287G agreement. What these are is that local police is basically working for ICE. So in such a situation, calling your local police potentially obliges them legally to arrest you on behalf of ICE and hold you until ICE can pick you up and then ship you to God knows where, some gulag in Louisiana or El Salvador. So if you have questions on how to respond to ICE agents, call your lawyer and let your lawyer speak on your behalf. And again, I'm going to do more on 287G agreements below. Next question, fourth question I commonly get is, what if I don't have a lawyer? Or that I can't afford a lawyer? So, 2 answers. 1, if you don't have a lawyer, reach out to your lawyers ahead of time, find a lawyer, interview them, and have them on standby in case you need to call them in an emergency. You can and you need to be, and you can be safely, fully transparent with your lawyer about your immigration status. If you're undocumented, your lawyer needs to know that. You can't hide that from your lawyer. Your lawyer has a legal obligation to protect you. They cannot, report you to ICE. Legally, ethically, morally, they would lose their law license if they did that. They have to maintain confidentiality. But they will only be able to assist you if they have all the information needed at hand. And if English is not your preferred language, then most lawyers have contacts with other lawyers who will speak your preferred language. I work with clients who English is not their first language. Urdu or Hindi or Punjabi is, and I've been able to translate for them in a way that made them feel comfortable. So keep that in mind. And if you can't afford a lawyer, if you're arrested and you cannot afford a lawyer, ask for a public defender. Especially if you're being charged with a crime, wait for your public defender. And to repeat yet again, no matter what, do not speak to law enforcement without a lawyer present. So with that understanding, I'm gonna actually go first to the 287G agreements because I need you to understand how critical these are. Because when we talk about how we are going to be fighting back against this fascism, one of the most effective ways to do that is to repeal these 287G agreements. So here's the background. Here's the background on how 287G agreements work and why we need to repeal them. So here's a very, very quick history lesson. The Illegal Immigration Reform and Immigrant Responsibility Act of 1996 added what's called Section 287G to the Immigration and Nationality Act. This authorized ICE to force state and local police to do what ICE wants them to do. In this case, round up immigrants like their Gestapo. 287G agreements allow federal ICE officers to require local and state police officers to work for them. That's pretty mortifying. It's basically expanding federal enforcement ability down to the local level. Getting those federal tentacles all the way down to your local police department. And so these agreements are why it's incredibly risky to call local police on immigration issues. It's a devastating policy for a number of reasons. One, it pulls local human resources for local needs and forces them to do federal work. And so if there's a local police matter, guess what they're not doing? Right? They're not doing local police stuff. Now they're doing federal immigration work. Two, it puts women in particular at risk and children in particular at risk. Think about this, because this is what happens. This is what I've seen happen. If an undocumented woman is suffering abuse, her abuser knows that she cannot go to law enforcement without fear of being deported or separated from her children or permanent detention. So 287G agreements perpetuate this cycle of abuse that countless women already face. And the studies show that, in fact, these result in an increase in domestic violence because men are sociopaths and they are abusive to women. And when women don't have a source of recourse, men know that, abusive men know that, and they engage in even more abuse. It's a lose-lose situation. And then the third thing is, and this part is really important, studies after studies after studies have shown that there's actually no evidence, none, that 287G agreements make us safer. A detailed study recently by the National Institute of Justice across 167 counties that forced 287G agreements found, quote, no evidence that 287G arrangements were linked to meaningful crime reduction, end quote. That's a pretty big sample size. That's a lot of money wasted for zero improvement in keeping us safe. On the contrary, as I mentioned, there have been hundreds and hundreds, in fact, thousands of reported cases of sexual abuse committed by ICE agents in detention facilities against even migrant children. We're not even talking about adults, horrifying enough as that is. We're talking about sexual abuse against children by ICE and Border Patrol happening in these detention facilities, concentration camps. Few are ever investigated or resolved. And so to ask ICE to round up immigrants while ICE itself has a documented history of epidemic sexual abuse, it's the height of absurdity and hypocrisy. Now, here's the really bad news. Currently, ICE has more than $50 billion in their budget, of all the money in the world, and the number of 287G agreements is exploding. For perspective, right now, there are more than 1,000 police agencies, local police agencies across nearly all 50 states. And if you subscribe to my Substack, there's a link, you can get it for free, that are engaged in 287G agreements, more than 1,000. For perspective, when Trump's term started, there were about 250 such agreements across 25 states. Now there's about 1,100 that are already in place across, I think, 40 states. 60 are pending, so it's going to be growing pretty rapidly as well. Only 6 states have banned 287G agreements. 7 states, sorry. Washington, Oregon, California, Illinois, my home state, New Jersey, Connecticut, and Hawaii. Only 1 state has no active 287G agreements, that's Vermont. Every other state, so that's 42 states, have active 287G agreements. And that's where we must get into the work to repeal them. So how do we repeal them? What do we actually do here? Well, this is the good news, that repealing them is actually not as complicated as you might think. It's not an act of Congress. These are local agreements, and they can be repealed on the local level. Here's the key call to action. 287G agreements cannot go into effect until local governments approve their enforcement. That means that if your locality has a 287G agreement, it is because your local elected officials voted for it. And so therefore, they can be repealed with that same local authority. Your city council, your mayor, your local sheriff, who's elected probably. And that local authority is only going to act or repeal these abusive agreements if local citizens activate, organize, and invest in that change. And let them know that if you're not going to vote to repeal these, we're going to vote you the hell out of office and elect somebody who is going to repeal these. So if you live in any of the states that I just mentioned, well, maybe didn't mention, if you live in the 8 states that I mentioned, then you're in good shape. There's no 287G agreements there. But if you're in the other 42 states, well, you got work to do. You gotta connect first in that list on my Substack. You can find it on there. Or send me an email, I'll send it to you. You need to go to your city council, your mayor, or whatever the relevant governing authority is who manages these agreements. And it is the local authority, I promise you. And you need to tell them to repeal this harmful agreement and instead uphold meaningful justice, uphold due process of law, uphold what the Constitution actually requires, and that is a protection of 4th and 5th Amendment and 14th Amendment rights. Now, if you do not live in such a locality, you can still petition your local government to pass ordinances to protect immigrants from abusive federal enforcement. And so finally, before we go to break, I just want to close with the 5 or 6 things that you can be doing. Obviously, repealing 287G agreements is critical. You need to activate on that. There's just no debate on that. But there's more, because the thing is, we're not helpless. We're not. And we need courage, and I encourage each of you to have that courage to step up and take action. I've said this repeatedly. We need messengers, not martyrs. I don't want to see people beat up and arrested and going to jail. I want to see people spreading the message that we have our strength in numbers, that ICE fascists are afraid of us because they're afraid of our unity across these culture wars. And that's what we need to be doing right now. So some of these actions I'm going to talk about have immediate effect, like the 287G agreement. Others are going to take time. And the thing is, we need to engage in both of these things. And we must act quickly to protect our immigrant neighbors now and build capacity to change fascist policy in the future. And so, don't feel like it's just one or the other. We definitely need to engage in both. So one, get involved in your local politics, guys. Get involved in your local school board, your local city council, your local teachers union, your local immigrant rights organization. Get involved. Show up at the next meeting. Meet your local elected officials. Understand the local issues impacting your community. Google is your friend in finding a local calendar of events, but use it. Look, all politics is local, and it's critical you get involved locally. I often remind folks that you recall a few years ago, and it's still happening now, but that initial explosion of book bans by folks on the right, banning books by black authors, by immigrant authors, by LGBTQ authors. Most people don't realize 90% of those book bans nationwide were ignited by 11 right-wing MAGA nut jobs. 11 people did that. You have 10 friends that you can find to work together with you on this, to protect our democracy. Get involved on that local level. It is critical. And I promise you, if you just attend local city council meetings for heck, 2 months, let alone 6 months, you're going to begin to understand so much more of what you need to be doing as well. Because there's folks already doing the work and they need your help. 2, communicate. Contact your member of Congress relentlessly. Remind them that you do not support these mass deportations or ICE. And I don't care if you live in the rubiest red of districts. You need to reach out to them because they have to document how many people are reaching out. And your silence is not helping. You need them to force them to document that you support due process of law, that you support a humane immigration policy, that you support equal rights for immigrants, documented or undocumented. Ensure they hear your outrage as much as possible. And likewise, when they do something right, when you have a member of Congress do something right, reach out and thank them. It's important we thank them when they do something right. That doesn't mean we absolve them when they do something wrong, but call balls and strikes and give credit where due, because then they'll take you more seriously when you call them and say, hey, you really effed up on this one and you got to fix this. 3, invest. And this is what I mean when I say invest: time, treasure, talent. If you can volunteer, invest your time. If you have talent, connections, relationships, invest that. If you have the means to contribute or donate financially, do so. Even if it's $5, $10, I promise you, it goes a long way. Especially as we're up against billionaires who are just writing these massive checks. At the end of the day, The many will always beat the money. The many will always beat the money, but we need you guys to step up and work with us on this. Not everyone has the time, so they donate. Not everybody can donate, so they give time. But pick one and make that investment. If you're listening to this and haven't subscribed yet, subscribe. I would love to have your support because, again, it goes a long way. Next, educate. We need to be informed on these key issues. Educate yourself, educate those around you. As corporate media continues to capitulate to fascism, you guys have heard me talk about this over and over again. Support writers and human rights lawyers working to stop fascism. Yours truly would be a great start. I'd be happy with that. But read the work of nonprofit media like ProPublica. I cited ProPublica earlier. The amazing investigative journalism they're doing, documenting these ICE fascists and how they're targeting American citizens and denying due process of law and abusing immigrants. This is not coming from CNN and from Fox and from these corporate media outlets. It's coming from independent media. It's coming from nonprofit media. So invest in them as well. We may not have the billions of dollars in dark money from corporate autocrats, but we have strength in numbers. Next, organize. Once you get used to what's happening on the local level, organize, bring your friends with you. You are the best ambassador for justice in your friend group. Lead by example. I myself contacted a lawyer friend of mine, Rachel, who had been attending ICE protests, or anti-ICE protests, and she pulled me along. And I've managed to pull along several people with me as a result of that. So grab even one friend and drag them with you and build that organizational capacity. It goes a long way. Each one, reach one. And then when your friend comes to the second meeting, then they can bring a third person. And again, that consistency matters. On a very practical, immediate level, think about sanctuary locations. During Trump's previous term, there were about 800 or more churches, synagogues, and other houses of worship that were established as sanctuary locations for immigrants. These were locations that invited immigrants who feared deportation or prosecution to remain within their walls for housing, food, and safety. And while these don't have any particular legal authority, it does add an extra bit of sand in the gears of ICE to slow down them targeting, especially when they're denying due process, targeting immigrants as well. And so if you have the capacity, definitely use those. If you're listening on Substack or on YouTube, make sure you hit that subscribe button. Your support is what makes this possible. It's what allows me to continue to build. We now have more than 160,000 downloads on this podcast, and that's made possible by you. So thank you for the continued support. Make sure you hit that subscribe button. I do not have a paywall at all, ever. I will never have a paywall on my content because I want to make this stuff accessible. I think we need to make more human rights content accessible. And so by becoming a paying subscriber, you don't actually get any special benefits. And I know that sounds weird to say as a selling point, but I provide that because I want folks who have the means and are inspired by my content to subscribe. But I don't ever want to be a barrier to folks who are just not able to, who are struggling maybe, or who just don't have the budget for it. I trust your judgment on your budget, and I don't want anyone to ever feel like they have to become a paying subscriber to be a supporter. I'm grateful for those of you who are subscribers, and for those of you who are able to become paying subscribers. Know that you're helping fuel my work in another way, and you're helping subsidize the cost for those who cannot become paying subscribers. So do hit the subscribe button on YouTube and on Substack, and let's continue to build. I want to close out the show today by asking a very important question. And that question is, how does it feel to have remained silent? This is an open letter, an open message to those who were in power or who have been in power, who silently watched a genocide unfold and said nothing. If you go back in history, you study World War II. As World War II ended, General Dwight D. Eisenhower declared something really profound. He visited a death camp and he said, "Get it all on record now. Get the films, get the witnesses, because somewhere down the road of history, some bastard will get up and say, this never happened." What I'm about to share is a deeply personal piece as I process these last 2 years. As we see this very fragile ceasefire where even now Israeli militias are still attacking and killing Palestinian civilians. Even now, as we're seeing the horror of the conditions of the bodies of Palestinians that are being returned, burnt, hung, shot in the head, tortured. As we're seeing the continued restriction of aid, you can count that the Israeli government has already broken the ceasefire in many respects. But this is a deeply personal message for that very reason. It's an angry message.
because I feel it's important, just like Dwight D. Eisenhower said, that we document the reality of what we have collectively witnessed over these last few years. We cannot simply let history be whitewashed. I will always maintain hope. Hope for the future, hope that is grounded in understanding of the current reality, one that honestly acknowledges how we arrived at a place of genocide and recognizing the work that remains. Back on October 25th, 2023, while commenting on a video of the carnage that the Israeli military had already unleashed and inflicted on Palestinian civilians in Gaza, Egyptian-Canadian writer and activist Omar Al-Akkad wrote, one day when it's safe, when there's no personal downside to calling a thing what it is, when it's too late to hold anyone accountable, everyone will have always been against this. I want to say that part again, because this is such a profound part. When it's too late to hold anyone accountable, everyone will have always been against this. Now, some 2 years later, as Palestinians cling to this fragile ceasefire, one, by the way, that should have been enacted on October 9th, 2023, when Hamas offered to release all hostages on the condition that Israel not enter Gaza, a condition that Israel rejected, a condition that the families of the hostages condemned Netanyahu for rejecting. Now, these 2 years later, I think about Omar's words. I think about the headline that I saw on October 6th, 2023, the day before. That headline said, quote, 2023 is the deadliest year for Palestinian children, say numerous human rights groups, end quote. And they were citing the dozens of children murdered by the Israeli military in 2023 to date. I think about the hundreds of thousands of Palestinian lives that could have been saved since October 7th, of the hundreds of Israeli lives that would have been saved, of the generations of Palestinians wiped from the earth in a cruel, calloused, calculated genocide. And I think about all the people in power who chose to remain silent. The politicians, the Republicans and the Democrats, who continue to fund Netanyahu, even after the ICJ asserted charges, even after the ICC issued a warrant for Netanyahu's arrest, even after the UN confirmed Israel is committing genocide, even after Israeli human rights organizations reported that their government is committing genocide, even after global scholars of genocide overwhelmingly confirmed Israel is committing genocide, even after Jewish and Israeli scholars confirmed Israel is committing genocide. I think about the failures of President Biden, about how his own staff is now saying that he never actually pressured Netanyahu to take a deal. Never once. I think about the cruelty of Donald Trump, who continued to arm Netanyahu and bragged at the UN that he got him whatever weapons he wanted and let him use them however he wanted. Just admitting to war crimes on the floor of the UN with no accountability. I think about the apathy of members of Congress, like my own Democratic Congressman Bill Foster, who refused to find the spine to so much as call for a ceasefire, while the funding bills he voted for continue to arm Netanyahu to kill one Palestinian child every hour of every day for the last 2 years straight. That blood will permanently stain his hands. I think about all the city councils I spoke before, begging them to call for a ceasefire, to divest from Israeli businesses, citing the rich examples of city councils divesting from apartheid South Africa to stop funding genocide, only for them to refuse to so much as take a vote. I think about the state senators and delegates who I pleaded with, but who instead pretended this genocide was just not in their purview. Even as states like Illinois bought tens of millions of Israeli treasury bonds to help continue to fund the genocide. I think about the politicians who profess to oppose Trump and his fascism while proudly standing with Netanyahu in photo ops, voting for war funding, and going on media tours to excuse and whitewash his genocide. I think about the major media outlets who claim that they're reporting the truth and the facts and that they're unbought. Yet on this issue of genocide, they either refuse to acknowledge this reality or whitewash it as made up, even laughed and said, there's no genocide happening. I think about the presidents and CEOs of big banks, of big tech, of major universities, who deemed it too political to condemn genocide, even as they actively supported the Israeli military with intel and data gathering, actively suppressing content calling out genocide, actively terminating employees and expelling students who dared to speak up against genocide.
I think about each and every single person entrusted with power, who instead chose to remain silent during these past 2 years of genocide. And for all those individuals I just mentioned, which is a lot, I have only one thing to ask you. Was it worth it? Was it worth it to know that this is how history will remember you? You know, in the future, your children and descendants will look back to see how you responded to this genocide the way we look back at the Holocaust, to see how our parents and ancestors responded then. And when they look back to see how you responded, they will find nothing but your silence. They'll hear of your accomplishments to win a seat in office, to break a glass ceiling, to achieve exemplary corporate growth, but then they'll wonder how you remain silent on the most horrific moral atrocity of our time. They'll sit stunned at how you looked away from genocide every single day and dared look at yourself in the mirror every single night. They'll wonder how they're supposed to remember you knowing that your cowardice, not your courage, was your most dominant characteristic. So that's my question. Are you happy with your silence? Are you happy knowing that future historians will study this moment in time and relive your silence with shock and horror? To know that even as children were burned alive by 2,000-pound bombs dropped on them as they hid in flimsy tents, you saw the videos on your phone and simply scrolled on by. To know that doctors had to perform cesarean sections on mothers on the street and without anesthesia because the Israeli military blocked basic medical aid, but you pretended that your feminism just didn't apply. To know that as Gaza became the global center for child amputees and that by April 2024, more bombs were dropped on Gaza than the combined bomb tonnage dropped on Dresden, Hamburg, and London during World War II. But you pretended that your children's advocacy stopped at your district's borders. To know that more journalists were killed in 2 years in Gaza than were killed in 27 years of Vietnam and World War II combined. But your free speech advocacy stopped at Jimmy Kimmel. Do you regret your complicity? Because that's what this is, complicity. Was your precious little political office worth it? Your 8-figure CEO salary? The VC fund bonus for your silence? The university president position for punishing students who spoke out? Was the fleeting praise from people who boosted your ego because it got them access to you worth it? Was selling your soul for perceived personal gain while more than 100,000 Palestinian civilians were murdered in schools and hospitals, in homes and shelters, mosques and churches, libraries and town squares, was it worth it? And will you now finally raise your voice to demand an end to Israeli apartheid, an end to anti-BDS legislation, an end to a policy of denying Palestinian statehood, and an actual prosecution of those who committed genocide and war crimes? Or will your silence continue to dominate you? Because you see, there's one thing we've learned over the last 2 years. Is that our world needs new leaders. Our country, our states, our cities, they all need new leaders. We need new teachers, new public servants, new voices in media, new activists for human rights, those with the courage to truly uphold justice above all else. Because here's the truth for our current leaders. The truth for our current leaders whose silence conquered their conscience. Whatever you rationalize, however you convinced yourself that your silence was worth it, I can promise you one thing. It won't stand the test of time. It will eat at you. It will creep into your conscience. It will gnaw at your soul. Maybe not today. Maybe not even next year. But it will. And as you see this Trump regime continue to advance its fascism here in the United States, you'll see this man in the White House enact the same policies on American citizens that the Israeli government is enacting on Palestinians. A system of racial apartheid. We're already seeing it. You heard me mention earlier 170 U.S. citizens detained and tortured and arrested, nearly all Latino. U.S. citizens. You're seeing Trump bombing alleged narcotic boats off of Venezuela and Colombia. No evidence, no due process of law. He's killed 27 people so far. 27. If a mass murderer, if a mass shooter walked into a school, God forbid, like they did at Uvalde or Sutherland Springs or Parkland, we would call that person a terrorist, rightfully so, to kill 27 innocent people. Trump's just doing this right now, nonchalantly, and there's no accountability. As you watch what's happening, understand that your complicity is enabling it. How you allow the government to treat people over there is how they're going to treat people over here. That's just the way life works. This is why Dr. King said that injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere, and that none of us are free until all of us are free. So I say, however you convince yourself that your silence was worth it, I can promise you it will not stand the test of time. It never does. It will eat at you. It will creep into your conscience. It will gnaw at your soul. Maybe not today, maybe not even next year, but I promise you one day, perhaps many decades from now, maybe perhaps as you prepare to meet your Maker, you'll think back to this moment in time. You'll wish you could come back. You'll condemn yourself for not speaking up, for not speaking out, for not clearing the incredibly low bar of opposing genocide. You'll see the videos of Hind Rajab and the documentaries of her sweet, innocent little voice asking to be rescued and being filled with more than 300 rounds and murdered in the most brutal, horrific manner imaginable. And you'll wish you had spoken up. And when you come to that moment of realization that you failed to achieve that very low bar of opposing genocide, maybe, just maybe, you will come to that realization while you still have life in your veins. And maybe one day, many years in the future, you'll join a Palestinian Holocaust remembrance event, and you'll muster the courage to finally speak up. Maybe one day, when it's safe, when there's no personal downside to calling a thing what it is, when it's too late to hold anyone accountable, maybe then you will always have been against this. Thank you for tuning in. You're listening to the Qasim Rashid Show here on Sirius XM Urban View Channel 126, the most awesome show in the multiverse. If you're listening on Substack, please hit that subscribe button. If you're watching on YouTube, definitely hit that subscribe button. I'm grateful for your support. My friends, continue to speak truth to power. Continue to raise your voice against injustice. We are the ones that we have been waiting for to come save us. Let's go out and do it. Make sure you tune in same time, same place next week. Thank you for your support. God bless you. Peace.